Well, here we all are. Thank you all for joining. So this is a very honest conversation about race. And what we're going to do is follow the EPIC system that I've developed over the past 2-3 years, which is very simple. It's equalization, personalization, information gathering, and then collaboration. We'll go through all the steps. But the key here is there are 4 things that you all agree to by doing this. And I'm going to need you to say yes after I say all 4. That you will be honest, that you will listen and not wait to speak, that you will commit to the conversation even if it gets uncomfortable, and that you will admit freely when you are wrong, which is, I didn't know that, I was unaware of that. That's the reason why we do this, is to connect people to have firsthand conversation. So do you all agree to these rules?
Yes.
Great. And so the first thing is the equalization. And what I do is we generally will talk about something else, because the point of this conversation is you need vulnerability, you need some trust. And it's highly unlikely you're going to feel connected to each other if you start off talking about the thing you have the least in common. So equalization is about what we all have in common, which is usually we search for it, but I have a very easy job because we all have been in a pandemic. So that's the great equalizer, is we have a global pandemic that has equalized us. So I'm going to ask each of you just briefly, what is your pandemic situation like? Because no matter where we are, we're all in the exact same boat on that. So Elizabeth, tell me sort of what your pandemic life is like.
Well, I live alone, so I haven't had a hug or anything since March 13th.
Oh.
So that's been tough. Actually, yesterday I got my first hug. My parents flew in for lunch yesterday, so I got to see them. So it's just been me and my 2 fur babies. Mm-hmm. I teach 2nd grade. Okay. So the 13th, we were supposed to come back on Monday and have 1 more week of school before spring break. And, we were kind of chatting as a staff after school, and I said, I have this sinking feeling we're not coming back next week. Yeah. And it was the Sunday night at about 8:00, we got word. Kids aren't coming to school tomorrow. Good luck, parents. So then the next day, scrambling to help the parents that couldn't find a way to keep their kid at home. Mm-hmm. And then we had about a 2-week phase where we didn't have any contact with the kids. And then we were asked to make phone calls. And I have 8 different languages in my classroom. So working with the interpreters and everything, trying to connect with all of my students, find out who's got internet connection, who doesn't, who's got computers, who doesn't. One of my students, he's one of 9 children. So trying to get enough computers into their apartment was quite a task. And then we began teaching online. So every day for a couple hours in the morning, I got online and taught as many of my students as I could get on. An average of about 13 of my 29 students would come on.
Yeah. And Shauna, your pandemic situation?
I'm still working, and I work in my job. We do outpatient services for pregnant moms. And so we were blessed that our clinic didn't see a ton of interruption, because you can't put a pause button on gestation.
No, it's
happening.
It's about time. Just hold it on.
Yeah. So I did get to do some admin days from home, though, and I have been. So we usually have 2 coordinators on, and we made the decision, well, our whole corporation made the decision to minimize as many people as possible in the actual campus site. So one of us would be working from home, one would be on site. And so I feel really blessed that we were able to have that option to work from home, because either work just went away, work just went away for people, and it couldn't be moved to home. So I think all in all, it's been unnerving, but we've not experienced anything what some people have.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
William, you?
Yeah, I'm glad you ended it like that, because I'm kind of embarrassed to say that I've been completely fine for the most part.
Your lifestyle was pandemic friendly before?
Extremely, actually, extremely. I'm single. I have no kids. As I mentioned, my girlfriend was on the other side of the country. We're in the same place, same area now. But I was planning on moving out here before things got crazy. And I worked from home 2 days a week anyway, and I can work from home I do software development, so I could work from home from anywhere, really. I'm also a hugger. Luckily, I do get to see my girlfriend more now, but she's actually a family medicine resident. So
wow.
I probably shouldn't be hugging her too much right now, but
so that's just, I wanted you guys to warm up to each other, the way you talk, the way it sort of, it helps establish humanity rather than go right into the issues. But, we're here to talk about race. So the next thing will be personalization. And what we're really going to do is, I want to hear a lot from William, and then you guys have the opportunity to information gather, which is to ask questions and draw out information. But what I want to do is set this up is, Elizabeth, for you, what is it that you would like out of this conversation? What is it? And I know we've gone back and forth a bit about this, but what is it you're looking for? Very honestly.
Well, something that I am trying to better understand is, when I look at the statistics and and I look at, for example, the incidences of police violence, the statistics that I look at and I see don't match with the fear. And so I'm trying to understand why the fear when the statistics don't match up.
The statistics being the statistic of these kinds of incidents.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And the question will be, where are you getting your statistics from?
Washington Post, Harvard University Studies, places like that.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And what statistic in particular, if you can think of one that you can remember off the top of your head? I know I'm asking you, but what is it that you're thinking like that doesn't add up?
I don't. Let's see here. How do I? The total number of unarmed individuals that is shot by a police officer each year is too many, of course, too many, but it's a total of 9 in 2019. Yes, 9 too many, absolutely 9 too many.
9 within the country?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
We'll get to this because I have very different statistics. And I think that's part of why it's important to do these conversations, because we're all getting fed through our channels, through the algorithms coming to our phones, different statistics and different information. Right. Okay, thank you. And Shauna, what are you looking for from this, ideally?
Oh, I just want to feel some shared humanity, and I want to feel connection. I want to feel like that I'm not hated because I'm white. Although I know there's some people that probably hate me because I'm white. And I have to understand that.
And we know for a fact there are people who hate Black people. We know that that's been there. So that cuts both ways, unfortunately, very unfortunately.
Right. And in my upbringing, I grew up in an inner city school. Now, Ogden, Utah is by no means a metropolis, but it's a major city in Utah. And I grew up in a city school and grew up among kids of Black, Hispanic, white, a really big mix. And we kind of laughed. I talked to a good friend from like my elementary school years on, a white female friend of mine and a Black male friend of mine. This week I've been talking to them, and I just said, our upbringing, I think, was unique. We had the blessing in Utah, because it's very white, that I grew up with people that looked different from me from the get-go, and it wasn't weird, to see people of color in my life, and I didn't think it odd or strange, and I just saw them as people. And I know I have biases, so I don't want to minimize that, and I don't know that I'm fully aware of all of them. But I just think in my growing up, I was never taught that Blackness or brownness were bad things. And it's such a hard concept for me to understand that that's taught within families and within communities, because it wasn't my experience. And I feel grateful and blessed for my experience, but just trying to like, what do we do now? And I guess and what do I do now? That's a lot. I'm expecting a lot, I guess, but I just want to know, what do we do now? Because I feel like I am waking up to things that I haven't realized before. because I had this upbringing, I had this naivety that, well, I'm sure there's some jerk racists out there, but there can't be that many. There's surely more people that feel like I do, right?
Yeah, same here.
But now I'm learning about systems that are oppressing, like whole systems, and breaking free of systems. And I want to hear more about that and William's individual experience with that system. Like, how was it for him? I want to hear about that.
This is a good segue because
personal stories impact me more. Like, yes, when I know somebody, it makes it real. And I know that places a burden on people to say stuff they've probably been saying for a long time, but now they have to say it again.
I appreciate you saying that. And I think the system and this work I've been doing for a long time is about stepping away from the sources on the news, the media, and hearing from people about their actual experiences. So we don't refute, oh, I don't believe that because it's William's eyes and ears that experience this. So switching from the equalizing to the personalization, William, I'd love you, and we'll talk a bit to discuss, and I'll ask you some questions. Personalize what your experience has been, especially Baltimore. And then you guys are in information gathering. I ask questions almost like a detective to understand more. But William, we're obviously there's a lot going on post George Floyd and other incidents. What has it been like for you, in Baltimore specifically, growing up as a Black man in Baltimore? Are these things that we're seeing on the news, are they unusual for you? The frequency, more so than people think, less so than people think? What has your experience been? Not just you, but the people around you.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm gonna go beyond Baltimore because, as you know, my experience in Baltimore is pretty diverse, as well as college, and then back to Baltimore. And first, I want to say to both of you, I am not easily offended, made uncomfortable in any way, shape, or form. So please ask anything the way that it comes in your head. Don't worry about trying to figure out the best way to say anything. One of the reasons why I'm here is because I feel like these conversations don't happen because people are afraid to ask the questions they have because of the reaction that they might get in intentions, but then they get snapped at. So I am definitely not that person. I'll try to help as much as I can.
What is everyone upset about? The protests, the situation. What is the big problem that people are having? People like Elizabeth and Shauna are not as exposed to, that they're not as aware of. What is the big problem that we feel like all this?
Well, the key word there is big, and I think that's the reason why it's taken so long for a whole lot of change to happen, because as Shauna said, the systems have been this way forever, and there are people that are in power that, for whether it's money or to maintain a certain power that they have, or for whatever reason that may not have anything to do with them being racist or having a hate for Black people, their motive is to flame division.
Elizabeth and Shauna, did you both watch the 13th?
Yes.
I did.
Okay.
I did.
You did.
I was like.
Yes, you did. Okay, so just so you know, William, they both watched the 13th. I asked them to see it sort of because it's a lot of history to cover.
Yeah,
the
there's a lot there.
From slavery through Jim Crow to the Law and Order to the police. Like, it's a lot of connections there. So there is a basis here that we're working from the 13th. In terms of the systems, in terms of your experience, people you know, being Black in Baltimore, and again, you went to a private school with me. That's how we know each other. But what was around you in Baltimore that you saw growing up?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of just in general, there are a lot of poor Black people in America for many reasons that we don't need to dig into unless you want to. But there are a lot of poor Black people that are struggling just to begin with, and anyway, poor people are going to be the ones that are most likely to be involved in crime. whether it's because they've given up hope or that's the only way they see they can feed their family. They're going to be involved in drugs because they've given up hope and they don't really see any way out. And that's the reality in a lot of these areas, right? So when you have that going on, and then the picture has been painted throughout history that that's all these people are. You know, they're lazy, they don't want to work, they want to live off of welfare, they're drug addicts, they want to rob you. When you combine those, even the best meaning person that's outside of that is going to internalize that to some extent. So that's pretty much the reality in this country. I was lucky that I did go to our school that we went to because I had a view of both worlds. You know, the people in my neighborhood were very nice. It's very family oriented. You know, I've gotten beatings from many parents on my block. You know, everyone sticks together.
Your aunt is whooping you because she's allowed to.
Yeah, they'll beat me and then they'll take me home and tell my father why, and then he'll beat me, basically. That's pretty much what would happen. And, you know, depending on how I look back, I can remember my good friends and running and playing and all of those things. But I can also remember the guy that lived across the street that was in and out of jail that got shot in front of our house. And, you know, I remember being in my aunt's house on North Avenue while a gang ran down a girl and literally raped her right in front of me and my cousins inside of the door. So it's not something you want to get used to or be desensitized to, but it's rough. It is rough. So I'm a bit long-winded, so I'm trying to figure out
so in terms of
things on track. But
no, it's fine. In terms of
so getting to like why people are as upset as they are. This is the reality that they live in. I think reasonable people can understand and increase police presence to some extent in these areas. I think reasonable people can even understand that some police may have gotten a bias if they're stuck patrolling these same areas and having to deal with these problems all the time, that they may not be as rational as they should, or they may make assumptions that they should. I can tell you, I've been pulled over more times than you can count. I've had guns pointed at me. And
there was a Facebook post yesterday that was sent around by a Black man that said, just asking a question, how old were you when the police first pulled a gun on you? And there are dozens of responses, 11, 12, 9, 13, 14, 8. Everyone who wrote was Black, and dozens and dozens of responses of what age they were the first time a police officer pulled a gun and put it in their face. It's not isolated. It happens. I do not know a Black person in my entire life that has not been pulled over an insane amount of times with undue force of a gun presented, or the get your ID, but the movement to get the ID causes the fear that they moved and I shot them, or I pulled out my gun on them. A friend of mine has a son that's 4, my daughter is 4, they play together, and she was telling me the other day, I still haven't figured out how he can have his ID displayed so he never has to reach for it. Because the asking for the ID and the reaching for the ID as the first movement that causes the gun to be pulled, I cannot tell you how many times I've heard that. William, in your own experience, that has happened many times.
Yeah, well, I mean, I ironically, Philando Castro, also a Black man in Minnesota. This was, I can't remember how many years ago this was, but he was pulled over because the cop said his taillight was broken or something, and he notified him. He's, just so you know, I have a licensed firearm in my car, you know, as I'm supposed to tell you. So when he went to reach for his ID, the cop said, don't reach for it, and shot him and killed him.
That has happened so...
That was in Minnesota. I was going to say, to the point you were making about Facebook, a guy that I coached actually at Park, Black guy that I coached at Park, lives in Baltimore. He made a video talking about his experience with his brother interacting with police in that way. And I'm not sure if I'm ready to participate in this yet, but I might have to, because I do kind of want to see it moving. And I'm thinking the next challenge really should be challenge your Black friend to talk about their interaction with the police. Just so it can be clear, it literally happens all the time. I don't know anyone who hasn't had it.
Not one.
I'm sure that there's a Black person somewhere who hasn't, but I honestly, it's a lot more than people think.
Friends who are celebrities driving their nice cars in LA pulled over on their way to church. Friends in Baltimore pulled over on their way. And not just pulled over, but pulled over with an aggressive assumption of criminality. And what you saw in the 13th, which I think was really powerful, is how we have become as a society. The criminality of Black people, mostly Black males, in the eyes of the law, even if it's not in our hearts, in the eyes of the law and law enforcement, is what's a big problem here. And it's systemic. And when you see the 13th, you can see not just how it starts with policing, but then down through the courts and the plea bargaining and the jail and the profiting of the industrial prison complex. Like, it blew my mind. And I grew up very unaware of it. I mean, I grew up in a very rural, blue-collar Maryland town. And William was probably one of my first Black friends. Aside from William and Todd, who were in our class, I remember on local Baltimore news, every single night, the arrests of the Black teens paraded across camera, every single night. And my father, a new immigrant, I wasn't born here, was absolutely terrified of Black people and Black culture, because that was all his exposure was through the arrests, the constant arrests. And I think that it's not every police department, but when it's bad, it's really bad. Like Ferguson, I think the statistic was each home in Ferguson had 3 search warrants. So every resident of Ferguson was used to police barging in their house, every single one, which is why they were just tired of it. You stop them everywhere they go. You come into their homes. You constantly appear. People are shot in their homes. Wrong suspect, sorry. And it really is. It is darker and more of a problem. I know most Black mothers will give their sons the talk when they're very young. Can you say what that talk is, William?
Well, it's basically what you should say, shouldn't say, should do, shouldn't do if you do come into contact with a police officer. I mean, they don't have to, it sounds like they're making us fear police officers before we even have a chance to make our own opinion, but they don't have to. You know, this is what we see everywhere. And Riaz, you pretty much said where I was going, is that people just get used to, there's always lights flashing, there's always police officers locking kids up. I know Mayor O'Malley is very localized, so you guys probably don't know, but he was the mayor in Baltimore, had aspirations to run for president. He actually ran in 2016. You probably don't remember him. He was on the stage.
Yeah, I do.
I was actually in Baltimore, like with a DC trip for one of my 2 older ones. I can't remember now which one, but I saw signs for O'Malley when we were there that summer. Yeah, I don't know anything more than that, but I saw the name.
His goal was to clean up crime in the inner cities of Baltimore. And pretty much the way he did that was literally just kids standing on the corner. And keep in mind, these are, poor inner city kids, no AC, nothing, no jobs. So they're outside playing. They just pulled them up and they would lock them up. And then if they didn't find anything, they would release them later. But now these kids have records.
Yes.
They have records. I mean, this could affect them voting. This could affect them getting jobs. But his numbers showed that he locked up this many people, and it shows that he was tough on crime. It's similar to stop and frisk in New York. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. The statistics look great when you just look at the statistics, but the tactics themselves, they aren't necessarily for the reasons that they say they should be. So all of this is happening all the time, to the point where people are used to it. People are even expecting it. But when somebody dies, that's when you feel like the justice system should at least be fair in that instance. And it hasn't been. And that's the problem. Like I think I'm trying to remember when this these recent protests started. I don't know if it was Michael Brown or if it was Trayvon Martin, but none of these were that long ago.
No.
You know, that there was a guy who was shot in New York because he got stopped and he went reaching for his wallet, and they shot him on the street, an African man. And, you know, there are R&B singers and rappers that have made songs about him, but there wasn't any mass protests, so we didn't hear it on the news. There wasn't, you know, any uproar about it. So the more you see this stuff, the thought process is, these people now know they can kill me and get away with it. You know, one thing that in this world of fear, one thing that you kind of can hold is, at least if this goes too far, they won't get away with it. Like how far can this really go that they can actually get away with it? And we have videotape after videotape, and you know, we start screaming, look at this, what's going on? And it's, well, what happened before that? What did you see in the video? What's in his past? The guy in Georgia, you know, the first thing that you hear when he was killed by two white men who weren't cops, right, was that he Ahmaud
Arbery.
Yeah, he tried to bring a weapon to high school. I think that was his history, so that they could then spread the narrative that you know, he had a past, so he probably was up to no good.
Elizabeth, Shauna, when you saw the George Floyd video, and right, I think why it's created such a moment here is because it seems so cut and dry. It is a prolonged murder of someone who is struggling, and they're no more needing to be subdued. What did you guys feel about that in terms of a reflection of what's happening, that someone captured that?
Well, there was no question. Sorry, go ahead, Shauna. Sorry.
I'll be honest, I've read the descriptions, but I haven't watched it because I don't know if I can. It's horrible enough to just imagine it. And so I haven't watched it. And I just have a hard time understanding how that could even happen. And how someone could be so hardened to do that. Sorry.
No.
But I've read the description and I just feel for the whole thing. I feel for the people that were watching, and I heard that they were just saying, stop it. They were trying to intervene verbally, at least, to say, stop what you're doing. And he was not interested in doing that. And I talked to my Black friend that I grew up with, and he's a police officer. And I said, Pat, I just think if I would have been there, like, and seen that happen, what would I have done? Like, I probably would have screamed, stop it. And if he didn't, like, I would have wanted to, like, go tackle him or something. He goes, he would have just pepper sprayed you. You probably would have gotten hurt. So people didn't do it. They didn't do that because they knew these cops had the power to do what they were doing in the moment. I'm amazed that he thinks he could do it. And he had to be aware. I mean, everyone's got cameras now. I don't know if he was aware someone was filming it, but man, you got to know, like.
Sure appears so from what I've watched.
And so I just think how he must have really had confidence that he was a part of a system that wasn't going to allow him to go down for murder in front of
the brazenness of it shows an understanding that you can record it. Mm-hmm. I'm not gonna get any penalty for it. Elizabeth, your thoughts on the video, whether you saw it or not, sort of what it
I haven't watched the entire thing, but I've watched parts of it. There's no question in my mind that it was awful. And it's something I would have that same instinct to want to go up to that officer, what the bleep are you doing? What is your deal? But, obviously I would be afraid to speak up because that officer could then turn that force on me. But yeah, when I saw the video, there's no question from what I saw that it was completely unnecessary. He had been subdued. What in the world? He had been subdued. What are you doing? And the other officers involved, I'm angry at them. Why aren't they saying something to that other officer and saying, stop, we're good, stop. So that's who I'm upset with as well, is those other officers who did have the ability to say something to this other officer and say, hey, stop it, enough.
And when, William, people say, this is a few incidents that have been caught, it's a few bad apples, it doesn't happen that often, it's not systemic. What is your reality and experience of that?
I mean, we talked about that a little bit before. So I've had it happen to me more times than I can count. I know plenty of people also. I can give you a couple of examples if you like. When I was in Baltimore, I worked in Alexandria, Virginia, a very nice, pretty wealthy area of Northern Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C. And I was driving to work one day on a Tuesday. So it's around 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. And all of a sudden, I'm getting pulled over. And there are literally 6 cop cars behind me with cops, like 2 in a car, all of them with their guns pointed at me on the street in Alexandria. Of course, I don't know what's going on. They're screaming at me through the bullhorn, which I can barely understand what they're saying. And all I'm thinking is, just don't move because I don't want to get shot. So eventually, I got out of the car, walked backwards to them with, my hands clamped on my head. They put me in handcuffs. And then at that point, I asked them, can you tell me what this is about? Apparently, someone had robbed the bank a few blocks away, and they were wearing a red hoodie, like a sweatshirt hoodie. That day, I was wearing a reddish sweater in my car that I was driving. I have no idea how somehow they put those 2 things together. I don't know how they saw what I was wearing. I wasn't speeding away from anything. And, I said, that's fine, do whatever you need to do. I know I didn't do anything wrong. But as I stand there are obviously crowds of people now. There's 20, 30 people on the street trying to figure out what's going on. They're watching me handcuffed, etc. And eventually they let me go. Honestly, I was as calm as I am now. I usually am these days, but that's because I've been through this. But to go back to Riaz's question of why people are so angry, most people aren't like me. Like, most people have a tipping point where they've had to deal with these things for so much and for so long. And then it just takes one thing to ignite the flame. And once you start letting that anger out, who knows how far that's going to go. I would say for the most part, I don't want to transition too much into this, but for the most part, people are just protesting. They just want to make enough noise so that it's being covered so that everybody can see what's going on, everybody can get behind it. But there are some people that are so angry that they're looting, that they're rioting. And I feel for the store owners, I feel for the police officers that had nothing to do with this, that now are putting their lives in danger. But to take everything full circle back to the system and bad actors, this isn't the first time, and there's evidence that there are bad actors that are mixing with these groups, causing tons of damage and tons of violence. And the whole point is to get people scared that this black mob is coming to your town to break into your house, or to get people so focused on the damage to businesses and the looting and all the unnecessary things in their mind that they forget about the reason why the people are hurting out there in the first place. And it's just cycle, and and then it's hard for people like you two actually to have this conversation with someone who's emotionally charged, and maybe they are out protesting, maybe they're not, maybe they're just trying to figure out how to deal with it on their own. It's hard for them to be able to talk about it at all. So this confusion, the chaos is intentional.
Yes.
Right.
It's a tactic that's been used not just in race relations, but it's been used for many things for I would say as long as this country's been here, but probably longer than that.
It's like the taking a knee. It's like the taking a knee becomes the whole thing, and we're like, no, that was his way of protesting the actual problem. The actual problem was a man was slowly executed in front of our eyes, and no one did anything, and all the officers stood there completely confident in their immunity. And I was watching the documentary LA 92 about Rodney King, and you had this videotape of a man being bludgeoned and bludgeoned and bludgeoned. And in 92, no one had cell phones. The only reason they had it is because it was LA and everyone works in the business, and a guy happened to have a camera because he was a film shooter. And so he recorded this whole thing, and it was so beyond what was needed. He was obviously subdued. He wasn't moving, it went on and on and on. And then went for a trial, moved the trial from downtown LA to White Simi Valley, and then they're acquitted entirely. And you're like, wait a minute. The fact that it was caught on tape, they thought, we've got it. We've got the smoking gun. Finally, at the time, the NAACP had, 55 allegations of police brutality a week in 1992, of people being bashed, hit, shot. But there's no evidence. There was no videos because no one had it. Then they had the video, and they got off completely. And the same thing with the guy in Georgia, shot. The guy, it's George Floyd, completely snuffed out in front of us. And then nothing really happens. And even now, they're launching an investigation. We'll see what happens. But there's a culture of the Black man's life is devalued. That if there is a crime down the street from me and 2 people are killed, if they are 2 white people, that would be a very different news story, a different investigation, a different everything than if it's 2 Black people. There is an inherent lack of worth we put into Black lives. And I think that's what in the 13th was so powerful, especially when you get to the end and you see all these self-recorded videos and you're like, still no justice, still no justice. Elizabeth, what are you thinking now?
Boy, I'm just taking it all in. And my cat is headbutting the camera.
Oh, cat.
Your cat can join.
Insensitive cat.
I know.
Let me ask you, how do you feel about what we're saying? Because obviously you're getting emotional. Let's talk about that. How do you feel about what we're saying?
Yeah, I don't want a corrupt system. I want to live in a country where people do get fair treatment under the law. And I have a number of friends, and so I'm in complete agreement that there are major issues within our criminal justice system. It angers me that we, because I'm a huge patriot. I love this country. I work with children who are refugees, and one of my students, for example, he was my 3rd grader. And when he came to us partway through 1st grade. Before he came to this country, he had witnessed his father being murdered and eaten by the men who murdered him. And, and when he was in 2nd grade and 1st grade, he would always wear his hood over his head. Like it was his little security blanket. And one day I am watching him go off to his reading group, and he's skipping down the hallway, and I just lost it because I saw this boy finally acting like a typical boy. And so I love this country, and I love what this country stands for. And I we welcome people from all over the world. We're the #1 destination for immigrants. And so there's something right about this country. And, but I'm angered by the corruption too.
I'll tell you, as an immigrant, I wasn't born here. I was born in Pakistan. I will say I have faced racism, especially being Muslim and being in Pakistan. It comes up in the news, but
yeah.
I've never felt the degree of a second-class citizen that I see Black people being treated as. That immigrants coming here almost have a better advantage than the Black man who has been here, was brought here, and has always been second class. I was in South Africa, where my in-laws live, and they're talking about apartheid. I'm like, well, America was an apartheid nation, until recently. And even then, if you watch the 13th, then you have the war on drugs, law and order, police states, SWAT teams and small things, the prison industrial complex that makes tons of money off of occupants in the jails. That's a big system that has been mostly set up against with Black men, and Latinos, but mostly Black men in this country. And it is so rampant that I don't know a Black person who's not felt it, whether it's, going up for a job or wanting, the law, or neighbors harassing them in a neighborhood that they moved into that's mostly white. We just did one of these 4 chairs conversations that we're doing now yesterday, and the woman said, when I was a child, she said, we had this Black foster kid come stay with us, and my brothers used to use the N-word constantly. And I'm like, I'm so glad you said that, because William's not making up in his mind that it's these rare instances. It is pervasive, but no one discusses it or acknowledges it. And I think what I like about what's happening now is that George Floyd video is so cut and dry that it's beyond a shadow of a doubt what happened. Now what I'm waiting for is, how are they going to discount it? Either George Floyd or the rioting or the violence. Something's going to discount it, and then the whole conversation won't be about that. It'll be about the Black rioters, even though I keep seeing white people constantly breaking things and stealing stuff.
Yeah.
It's
well,
like,
that's what's different, by the way. In terms of having some kind of hope, not to focus on the white rioters as some kind of hope, but what's different is when you watch these protests, not just the rioters and looters, but them too, very diverse. It's going to be very hard to say this Black mob is causing all this damage and disruption and blocking our roadways. These protesters are from everywhere. I think it's going to be a lot harder to do that. And I also want to say, just for Elizabeth, this is me giving you a long distance hug. This country does a lot of things right. I love this country. I think one of the worst things in the world is that most people don't travel more, because whenever I travel somewhere, I come back and I appreciate what we have here even more than I did before. But, as Americans, we are one huge family, right? And, nobody in my family is perfect. I love them to death, but there's definitely arguments and fights because I do love them. I'm not gonna leave them. I'm not gonna be, people that, if I'm done with you and I'll never talk to you again, I'm not gonna argue with you. That's a waste of time, right? But your family, you're gonna argue with. You're gonna try to get to the bottom of the problem and try to, come out better on the other end. And that's how I feel about what's happening now and what we do in this country when we do protests. And it sucks when it's a situation where you can kind of try to pin races against each other, because it's, just like with the women movement, it wasn't men versus women. This is women crying out for help. And then there's some bad actors that are trying to distract so that cry is heard. It's the same thing here. It's just easier to mask because there's so many other issues involving race in this country that can block it.
Elizabeth, Shauna, when you watched the 13th, how much of that did you not know? And what, if anything, when you saw it all presented, did you take away that you felt was something you didn't know that was real? Or what did you take away from that? Because it is a bit like an argument. I find that documentary is a bit like an argument, the way it lays things out. What did you both take away from that in terms of the scope of the problem?
I'm gonna grab a tissue right quick. I'm
Sure.
listening.
So before I watched it, I've had lots of conversations, Facebook, reading lots of things. And we had a protest in downtown Ogden. Salt Lake City's sadly devolved later, and there was destruction and stuff going on. But Ogden, we're a smaller community, and it was a beautiful experience. I felt like I had to do something. And I was a little worried going. Sheldon went with me, and I'm like, sometimes these things can go bad, they can go south, but I feel like I got to do something. So we went, and it was beautiful. There was nothing but love there. And there was a lot of different types of people there, all colors. And our community really came out. I felt hope in our particular community. And I guess that's what you have to focus on, is my corner of the world. Mm-hmm. I can start where I'm at. Mm-hmm. But I knew by that time, I kind of finally realized like what I was fed as a child. Like, I'm born in 75. And all the civil rights stuff was fairly recent, by the time I'm a school kid. And I remember learning about slavery and about Jim Crow laws and the Civil War, and it was all horrible, but we fixed it. It's all fixed. Mm-hmm. And this week was the first time I realized how broken it still really is. And it was heartbreaking, because I thought, I did not know that the clause in the 13th Amendment that allowed for the criminal aspect. Well, we can enslave you if you're a criminal. So I didn't know that in the South, they basically criminalized a bunch of black boys. They were little boys. And caught them doing whatever little boys do. And didn't pick up any white boys, I'm sure, for the same stuff. And they're the ones that rebuilt the South. I didn't know that. And I didn't know about this movie that I watched. I was like, this is hideous. Like glorifying the Ku Klux Klan and lynching and depicting black men the way they depicted them. I was horrified. And I'm like, well, this makes complete sense why we are where we are right now. It's horrible that we're here, but now it's making sense. And then, like you said, they got, it's just every time that Black people had hope that we're going to be at a level playing field, someone else is like, nah, can't have it. And we're bringing something else. And so I did not know. I didn't realize. And the whole war on drugs stuff, I was a young kid, and just say no and all that, but I didn't know about the stuff about how they criminalized crack cocaine possession way more.
Yes. So cut and dry. So cut black and white. Newt Gingrich saying it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
That was wrong.
So all of that just made me go, this is just really, the state of affairs it feels overwhelmingly horrible. And I think, how do we give hope to people that have been now pushed down for generations? If they're dependent upon, if they're in a dependent situation, which many are that are poor, they're collecting welfare or whatever things they can. They've been gutted. They have no confidence. There's a few of them that have that spark inside that like bursts out and they go do something. They get out of the hood and they do all that stuff. But there's so many that just can't overcome it. And I think that's what we need to fix. But I don't know how we fix that. Because people, if they're given hope and something to do that's constructive, we know human beings want to do those things. People don't want to do the things that poor people end up having to do to put food in their mouths. We know that. And there's a dark side of human behavior, and we know that too. But when people are given what they need and opportunities, true opportunities that are reachable, that they have hope they can reach, then we can begin to fix it. But right now, I just think, dang, I'm so mad. I'm so mad that I was given this whitewashed form of history from a kid. And because of my upbringing, what it was, I just really thought, it wasn't to the degree that it is. And I didn't realize the systems that have been put in place to keep people down. And that's what we have to dismantle. But I don't know how I can change it exactly, except, lend my voices to others. But I guess that's where and this won't be fixed fast. I think that's the thing that's also discouraging too. It's there's no fast fix for this. It took years and years and years and decades and centuries for this to be where we are. And we can't snap our fingers and have it be. But we can, I think, at least make sure people aren't killed because of the color of their skin. Hopefully,
I think there's something very powerful, because I would say one of the biggest frustrations I have heard from my friends in the Black community is they don't even know the extent of it. They don't even know the extent of it. And so when you watch the 13th, and same with me, when I watched the 13th, it was a big eye opener. Like, I remember finishing and just sitting on my couch and being like, what? Completely unaware of me. And I have William and Todd, but they're not necessarily talking about it to me because it's just so aware part of their lives. And I think the one thing that I'm trying to do with this 4 chairs is say, at least if you know the scope of the problem, that it's not a couple of bad apples, it's not just, but it's a lot more. Then at least for a Black person, it's like, thank God they at least know the problems exist. Otherwise, they're not even acknowledging it is soul crushing. Elizabeth, your response to the 13th, your response to sort of.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm so sorry you both are getting I love that you're getting emotional, because it shows a deep empathy, which is so what we need. So thank you for being so honest about your emotions. But how are you feeling?
It's just how I'm programmed.
I was aware of some of it, but I certainly wasn't aware of how bad. And there were many things, that what Shauna said about, that clause in the 13th Amendment. And I had been aware of the difference in the sentencing with crack versus cocaine, but it didn't really register to me the ramifications of that. Mm-hmm. I have a friend who's a corrections officer here, and he works at a prison that used to be a for-profit prison, and it was taken over by the state. And it does sort of make you wonder, it's like, why in the world do we have prisons for profit? Because in order to profit, you've got to have inmates.
That's effed up. That's effed up. Like, the more bodies I have in here, the more moolah. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Not to interrupt, but real quick, when you were talking about Ferguson before, I was going to mention that their police system was run mostly on the fines that they gave to people. So when they did finally do the investigation, they found that it was extremely disproportionate who they actually fined, Black versus white. They were pulling people over just so that they could make more money for their precinct.
Right.
And that's what we know about.
One of the times I got pulled over, I was pulled over because it was close to the end of the month, and the police officers had to make sure that they had enough, and a warning would work. So I thankfully got away with a warning, but those policies are what? Yeah. It's a really perverse incentive to find something to pull somebody over for.
So when I travel the country, which I've done so much, I will sit in rural Alaska in a diner, and I'll talk to a white fisherman conservative, and I'll ask him, what is your greatest fear? And he will say, the overreach of the government. And then I will go to a Black friend, and I will say, what is your biggest problem in the world? And it's the overreach of the government through law enforcement. And I'm like, you guys are saying the exact same thing, that a conservative ultimately wants the government, and as enforced through law enforcement, to stay away. A Black man also wants the same thing, as the overreach of the government to be checked. That is an interest that two sides of the opposite political spectrum actually have in common, that they actually both distrust the overreach of government. The difference is that a white man can say, I want the government to leave me alone so I can have equality, a black man will need some protections in place to even get that equality. So the true hands-off conservative thing works if the assumption is everyone's equal. If everyone's not equal, you have to put in something so that there's an even playing field. And I'm not even talking about affirmative action. I'm talking about him not getting shot when he gets pulled over and you getting a warning. So conservatism is not that far. When you talk about a conservative in rural America and someone, a black man in inner city, they both don't want the overreach of the government through enforcement. It's just he needs protections that the other one has inherently.
Yeah.
And we both don't have to be radical. Like, I'm sorry I keep jumping in when you're saying this. That's another thing that I've been pretty passionate about in today's climate. You know, I have plenty of wonderful conservative friends, and
me too.
You know, they're purposely getting painted a certain way. Liberals are purposely getting painted a certain way. It's just like what's happening with the race thing. There are people that have agendas that are pitting us against each other so that we're not seeing what's really going on. And, you know, most of us are just in some spectrum in the middle that disagree a little bit on how we want to get to the same end.
Right. And there's a different, like, the problem is that everyone's like, that if you as a conservative support William and his rights, well, then that's going to lead to a version of socialism because he wants a handout, blah, blah, blah. And that's how they get you to not care about his rights, because they couple it with the economy. And I'm like, why is civil rights ever? But that's how they get conservatives to step away from helping, is because they make it seem that if you want to get on William's vision of life, it's all socialism, everyone equal. And that's not true. That's not necessarily true. I mean, I don't know if William wants socialism, but the black community doesn't necessarily need that. And so what their needs and their wants get overlooked because they get eclipsed by some dream of an economy that a conservative will run away from. But all the protections that William and his peers need from law enforcement has nothing to do with the economy. But they mix them together to make you turn against him. And there are real possibilities for creative collaboration. And that's the final phase of EPIC, which is C is collaboration. So let's talk about this. What can you guys do? William, what can they do either specifically or where? What would be most useful? Because we want to actually have things that they can do and not just feel bad.
Well, first, I want to ask Elizabeth if you were finished, because I definitely jumped in there because I so.
Mostly, I mean, I you know, nothing surprises me when it comes to corruption anymore. So that I was disgusted by that. And, I think, I hope that we can air out some of these systematic problems and figure out a solution, but I'm afraid with the way our political system works, we won't.
It's not a liberal or conservative solution. It's a human solution.
Yeah. And that's the answer to the question you just asked me. And Shauna, when you were talking, I was actually thinking this too, because you were saying you wanted to do something, you don't know what you can do. This is what you can do. My voice only goes so far, and I'm willing and able to speak more on this than most Black people, I should say.
I agree.
But, an understanding from you two, a willingness to discuss in detail these things coming from you two goes a lot farther. Honestly, I'm angry and emotional about what happened to George Floyd. But I think what's moved me the most, what's made me the most emotional, is seeing how diverse these crowds are. And friends of mine reaching out to me to see if I'm okay. I mean, I have a coworker, a Black woman, and another coworker, a white woman, reached out to her. They were working on something together. And in the email, she's like, hey, before we get into work, I just wanted to say, I hope you're okay. I have 2 boys, and, it hurts me that I know that they're privileged to do certain things and your son isn't, and blah, blah, blah. And I just wanted to say that. And she texted me because she said, I need your help because I don't know how to respond to this. Like, I know she's coming from a good place. You know, I love her, but I don't even know how to answer. And I read what the woman wrote, and I'm like, that's like the nicest thing somebody can say to you. And you know, you still don't really know how to respond. So it comes from the other side too, you know. But the fact that this time feels different. This time it feels like maybe it's because it is more cut and dry. Maybe it's because over the years, more of these things have been videotaped, and you know, it's hard to say it's just an isolated incident anymore. Whatever the case may be, the more people that don't look like us that are talking about this, marching about this, protesting about this, that's the best thing. And honestly, personally, even if you don't feel comfortable doing any of those things, just the fact that you care to try to understand the truth, try to understand more of what's going on. Another thing that always gets me when you were speaking about, you know, what you learned about the Civil War, and then everything was fixed. There are still textbooks that I believe are in parts of the South that say that Blacks came to America willingly. Mm-hmm. They were basically indentured servants, and they thanked their white masters for putting a roof over their head and feeding them, and they worked for them for that reason. That still exists. And you know, of course, with this
going say that they were just going to starve in Africa. They saved them from starving in Africa.
I mean, and even
well, I don't know what climate conditions were like there, but I don't know what we're basing that off of. Nothing.
And even forget things like that. There's the devastation of Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
I was going to say Tulsa, Oklahoma,
right. which almost no one knows about, is a huge moment in Black history in America. Yet another time that the legs were taken out from under them in trying to achieve autonomy and prosperity. Never talked to me. I didn't even know about it till a few years ago. You know, and
I've never heard about this.
Yeah, see,
I heard about it on Beck's radio.
Please look it up. Black Wall Street was, you know, they were trying to, on their own, you know, pull themselves up by their bootstraps, as you say, but they were too successful. And basically the rioters came and they burnt it down with the help of the military. The town was bombed.
The first time that we ever released bombs on U.S. soil was in Tulsa, Oklahoma in the 1920s on Black Wall Street. Again, it just, I guess to me, the big win in some ways is that people understand the scope of the problem. That a week ago, people thought, okay, it's a problem. But now after this conversation and talking to women, you're like, oh, which is not to overwhelm you so much as for you to understand that when William and other people are protesting and angry and upset, that you're like, oh, I get why. And it's not, you know, Colin Kaepernick taking a knee. It's not about that. It's about something else.
Yeah, and it's real fear too. I mean, you know, a lot of times you'll hear people say, well, why are people still talking about slavery? Slavery was so long ago. Well, since then, you know, we have had Tulsa, Oklahoma. We've had Rosewood. We've had I don't know if you all know, but Central Park was another area where Blacks were creating their own little community, but they thought that would be a great area to have a park for them. So they literally wiped the whole thing out. And that's, you know, that's how people lose hope. And generationally, it's hard to come back from that. This pandemic that's going on right now, that's hitting the African-American community like crazy because the poorer people are in these essential jobs and they are in houses with 8-9 people, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and they have
a lot of people are looking forward to a vaccine, but there's still a lot of Black people that are afraid to take a vaccine because of the Tuskegee Airmen that they purposely gave syphilis to use as test. And I remember early on, there was a rumor going around that the French were planning on doing vaccine tests on Africans. It died down pretty quickly. Maybe it was true, maybe it wasn't. I didn't dig into it enough to say for a fact, but there's all these little things that are involved that people don't know So when all they see is the reaction or the anger or the standoffishness or acting like you have a chip on your shoulder, similar to your student that was wearing his hoodie, right? When you see that and you don't understand why, I guess the best thing I could say in terms of what I would like for you to do is to ask. I think more people, like what we're doing right now, I think this is what people need to do. We need to get to know each other. We need to understand what's going on. And there may be cases where Blacks are making bad assumptions because of history. And they need to have conversations with people to understand that that's not how it is now either. And they can be more comfortable in certain situations than they feel like they are. But we all have to get together and have the talks.
Can I ask a question?
Sure. Of course.
So that's one of the first things I did on my Facebook feed was I just said, I need to hear. You can message me, you can post him here, but I need to hear about how you're treated differently. If you feel comfortable, would you share? And I had one friend who's Hispanic. Actually, I never know if I'm using the right term, but anyway, or Latino or Latinx, I'm not sure. But anyway, and she just started unloading on my Facebook feed all these instances, and she's like, Shauna, this is real, you know, and these are people that have died, and there's the stories, and it was overwhelming. I'm like, I'm trying to intake this I need to take it in, and I'm trying to take it in doses I can handle. And but I didn't have anyone really firsthand respond with a circumstance. And I reached out to my like elementary school friend that I graduated high school with, privately, and said, I just want to hear whatever you have to tell me. I want to hear it. And we had a phone conversation just yesterday. He talked a little bit about high school and a few things. He didn't have any big major stories, but he's also a cop, so he's kind of riding the line too, right? But I told Sheldon and I were talking, and there's some people that I just don't think get it yet, and I have hope that they will. I think they don't want to see it because it's ugly. It's really ugly.
Mm-hmm.
Ugly, and people just want to believe that it's fine, and I totally get that. But someone's like, I lived in the South. I mean, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, aka Mormons. Mm-hmm. And I have plenty of friends that are, I think, you know, they have all different ranges of ideas. Just because we're the same religion doesn't mean the same. And he's like, I went to the South as a missionary, and no Black person ever told me they felt oppressed. And my husband responded like, did you ever ask? The question is, if you ask, they feel comfortable telling you. Like, I think that's an incredibly vulnerable thing. That's like, I'm going to tell you about my rape, or I'm going to tell you about another humiliating experience that totally gutted me as a person. And are you going to share that with someone if you don't think they really want to know?
Yeah.
So is it fair to ask people to share? Because I've heard some people say people don't want to share that. Is it fair to ask, in what ways can you ask? Because I generally want to hear what people have to say, but I don't want to make them feel obligated to share what they don't want to share.
No, I mean, I think you're fine. I mean, you got to have thick skin, right? Because not everybody wants to share, and not everybody expresses that in the best way. I spend a lot of time going to different friends' Facebook stories to try to kind of diffuse the flames of things like that, because I don't want people to run away when they do ask the question. But yeah, if you don't ask, then I don't see anyone reaching out personally, because I think the rape example is a perfect one. I can't imagine how you would feel if you just went up and told someone who didn't ask about that, and then their reaction was, you know, I thought we were having a beer. Why are we talking about this? You know, it would be devastating. So that's, you know, years and years and years of this. I think that's where a lot of people are. Like, even to the point where sometimes if you do ask, they question your intentions. So they might not share.
And I think there's needs to be, you know, there's there's a difference between being a minority in a country and a majority. And I don't say it as a white thing, because if we were in Saudi Arabia, it would be a very different conversation. But in America, you're in the majority. And so I would say there is Jonathan Haidt, who's this amazing professor at NYU, talks about this concept of anti-fragility, the anti-fragile, that when you engage in these conversations, Shauna, and you ask people, they may snap, they may lash back. But the key is for you to say, that's not about me, that's about the problem. And so when you go in, there's a thought of being anti-fragile, that I'm wading into dark territory. We may get emotional, and if it does, that's okay. I'll go do the next one. But it's not really about me, it's about the problem and the fact that this person has not had someone ask them, or when they did, they didn't respond well, or they, as so many, there's, when William says he's one of the most willing people to talk about it, it's true. I have some friends who are like, I'm not even doing this anymore, because I'll do the conversation, maybe there'll be tears, and nothing will change. And they have no hope that there will be impact. And so I think to have these conversations and to end with, again, the epic framework, the C is what collaboration, what can we both all do? Because if you just feel bad, feeling bad doesn't help anyone. Feeling shameful of being white doesn't help anyone. And so what is useful? It's like when people used to come at me with either being anti-gay, anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant, I usually go into it and I'm like, that has nothing to do with me. But let me see if I can change your mind. Because if I don't, what's the alternative? And so you guys being now a little bit more aware, not just with the documentary, but this conversation, and at some point I'll have this conversation ready to share with other people, because I think it's a very useful teaching tool. I would love for you guys to share it and to become those people who say, it is a bigger problem than you may think it is. It is a bigger problem than people think it is. And that's what I think is most useful, because if people won't even acknowledge the scope of the problem and think that the Williams or the liberals are exaggerating it, that is the first way to discount it. And the most painful thing to have happen is for it to be discounted.
Yeah, and just quickly, I think I'm so glad we're having this conversation, because I think so often we're not willing to have conversations about tons of topics. Mm-hmm. We've gotten into our little echo chambers that me just being willing to understand somebody else's theology is considered an act of bravery.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's awesome, because a lot of people don't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, and through my conversations with Glenn Beck and my relationship with him and meeting you guys, I absolutely had assumptions about Mormons. Absolutely, you guys have bad PR too. And I was like, wait a minute, we don't interact. And because of this, and the curation of it, we interact even less, which is why I'm grabbing people from all over the country and dragging them together, because otherwise you'll never cross paths. And your stories about each other will never cross paths. But the most demeaning things about you will come up in each other's feeds, because that's how we keep you on your path. And we keep you going, is if we not only say your path is right, but every other path is bad.
Yeah, no, I thank you for doing it, Riaz, because it's a very unique way that it's really hard to do this of yourself. Mm-hmm. Because I don't know how I would have, I mean, I've reached out to contacts I had, but there's so much beyond what I have personal reach in. And so I really appreciate what you've done, because I've looked back at my history, I have pioneer history in my religion, and I have people that were houses set fire, they drove them out of Missouri. They killed and raped women. They did these things just for what they believed. And there was a battle at Crooked River where the Mormon men finally said, we've had enough. We're tired of just fleeing and letting them burn our property. We're tired of fleeing and letting them do whatever they want. We keep thinking we can just avoid it. They're gonna stop, but they don't ever stop. And so at Crooked River, a militia member of Missouri was killed, and boy, all hell broke loose then. And these Mormons are all crazy and they're violent. Mm-hmm. And so as I look at the rioting situation, I have so many friends. I'm like, guys, can't you see? In my history, there's this, and in my history, I have Native American blood in my veins. And there's just so much pain we've done to each other because we don't understand each other. And we won't often. And I'm so glad we can try. And there are people that want to try, because I certainly do.
Elizabeth, what are your sort of final thoughts about either this process, sort of how this past hour and a half was, whatever you want to talk about, but want to give you a moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to second what Shauna said. I think it's so crucial that we are willing to talk like this and listen to each other and not just shout at each other on Facebook and Instagram and what have you. Yeah, I'm just absorbing it all still.
William, anything from you before we wrap it up?
Well, yeah, I mean, even before I get there, though, Elizabeth came in saying she wanted to talk about statistics. I'm a stats geek. Can we talk about statistics a little bit?
Let's do it.
I mean, and you know, being semi-serious about it, I think, you know, we all take statistics as backing of the truth, and they're weaponized often to things like this. There are a couple that I usually see floating around. I don't know. I didn't know what the statistic was of men that were murdered. You said it was 9, and Riaz, you said it was something else.
9 armed. Yeah, 9 unarmed.
Yeah, but the one thing I do know is that I believe it was Ferguson. I think it was after Michael Brown, was when the previous administration created the task force and they started investigating more and more of these and requiring that these police forces actually report these accurately. There was no requirement of any reporting of these before that. And that wasn't that long ago. And Jeff Sessions killed that. So the only requirements of accurate reporting of these type of stats lasted for all of about 2, maybe 3 years. So the actual stats on these, we really have no idea what they really are. That's one thing. The other thing I was talking to somebody about yesterday actually was these uprisings, protests, riots, whatever you want to call them, they've all been surrounding people that died. Besides Rodney King, I can't really think of any other case where somebody didn't actually die from what happened. And we've talked about today, people have gone through this daily and lived, and there has been no discussion of it. None. There's no discussion. There's no stats. There's nothing. And of course, the people dying is most important because we don't want to die. But the bigger problem with the police brutality is what's happening, period. I don't think that guy in Minneapolis wanted to kill him. I don't think that was his goal going into it. I think he may have been egged on. I think he should get charged for murder, as he is. And I think when he was in that position, because of whatever was in him, he's like, oh, no, I'm not going to stop what I'm doing. I have the power now. But he could have easily took his knee off after 6 minutes. George Floyd would have, you know, been in the hospital, maybe ended up in a coma for the rest of his life.
No statistic.
You know, fraudulent check. And we wouldn't even be talking about it right now. So unfortunately, there's still like a lot of unknown things that are out there. But one of the dog whistles is, you know, 13% of the population commits over 50% of the crime. That's the one that really, really got to me, because as a stats geek, you cannot use statistics that way. It just doesn't work. In reality, a percentage of the 13% commits crime. It's actually, I think, about 2%. Or maybe I think it's about 1% actually. It's a very small percentage, 1 or 2%, that are committing crimes. And to silence people that are crying about being treated a certain way, being followed, being stereotyped, being harassed, that's 98, 99% of us that are paying the price for these legitimate criminals And that's ignoring the argument that you all know about. Not all of them are legitimate. Not all the people that are getting locked up are legitimate. Even some of the ones that are, there are white criminals that are getting away with the same crime because their communities aren't getting targeted the same way. Not saying that that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that the statistics tell funny stories as well in these discussions.
Yeah.
Central Park 5 people picked up, put in jail, DNA
Perfect
evidence
example.
a decade and a half later clears them. But still criminals, still.
Yeah, if you all don't know about these things, Central Park 5, the Black Wall Street, Rosewood, I can't remember what it was called, but the Black community that is now Central Park in New York. If you Google that, you'll probably find that. Riaz, I actually got some homework for you. You might surprise me and tell me that you already know about this.
Let's see.
Did you know that the creator of the Roland Park community in Maryland was basically the originator of the, what's it called? Basically that style of community. And what he did is he creatively created deeds to be sure that no Blacks could move into that area. And he was so successful,
Didn't know.
he became known around the country, and other people that built other developments like that, they followed his lead in setting up the same things. He basically started redlining.
I didn't know that.
The area that I'm talking about is about 5-10 minutes from the school that we went to. And it's very nice, very liberal area now. But yeah, that's the history of Roland Park.
I didn't know. I mean, it becomes, you have the police brutality. You have things like this. You have Black Wall Street. You have, lack of representation. It's a big problem. It's a big problem.
Redlining, gerrymandering, suppressing the vote, which is also a big deal right now that a lot of people don't really understand the extent of what's going on with that. But if you look at some of the maps that are drawn for districts to make
they're crazy.
They're crazy. They're crazy.
There's one that looks like Donald Duck, like literally looks like Donald Duck.
They're insane. They're insane.
Yeah, they're nonsensical except for one purpose.
Yeah.
It's very obvious, and some of those have gone up to the Supreme Court and still didn't change in any way. And all of these, whether it's directly or indirectly, like in some of them, the Black people are just part of the group that they're trying to affect in a negative way, but somehow we're always part of that group. Whatever the case may be, we're getting the short end of the stick. And I'm not saying that to complain. It's just more that people don't really know that, because in general, we don't talk about it. We don't talk about it until something gets really, really bad. And really, really bad is when me or my father or my son or my brother or my friend or your friend can walk down the street minding his own business and get murdered. That's where the line's drawn right now. And I think most Black people are okay with us dealing with that line now. Let's take care of that. Everything else, we can live with and work on, but we got to get everybody on the same page with this one because it's pretty serious.
Yeah. Thank you all very, very much. I would say, Shauna and Elizabeth, that Maya Angelou says, when you get, give, and when you learn, teach. So I think the best thing you can do is tell people, hey, take a look at this documentary, The 13th. This conversation will be available for you to share with anyone you want, because it's a good example of how these conversations can happen, and no one got angry, no one felt uncomfortable. I would say you three have a lot of connections even though on paper you may not seem like you do. So hopefully both the documentary and this can be used as a teaching tool to share with others. But I would say the biggest problem I find in the frustration is that people don't even know the extent of the problem. And if you don't even know the extent of the problem, we're not even close to solving or helping with it.
And it's hard to motivate some of my friends to want to know.
Yeah, because it looks pretty fine.
I know that's going to be the challenge I face. I shared the name and where they could find the documentary with my 2 extended families, and I have to start with that. And we've been talking about it like crazy with my kids at home. Like it's been the conversation all week.
Yeah.
And So we'll do that, and we'll see where else we can take it.
Thank you. Thank you all for participating. Thank you very much, guys. And
Thank you.
I will connect
Thank
you
you
all
for
in a
doing
chat
this.
box. So you all, if there are articles that come up, or what do you think about this, or take a look at this thread, or I would like you all to have each other to share materials with. So I'll connect you all in an instant message. But thank you all for trusting.
Absolutely.
And,
It was a pleasure meeting both of you. And
Yeah.
absolutely, any questions you have or anything you want to talk about with me, feel free to reach out anytime.
Thank you, William. That means a lot because it can't be easy to do.
Well, I mean, it is when this happens.
Yeah.
Like, you are awesome. I've got tons of other awesome friends, people that I meet that are just open. You know, some of them walk away disagreeing, but a lot more people are open than we know.
Yes, I agree. I agree. Thank you all very much. Have a good evening, and really thank you for your trust.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, Riaz.
Bye.
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 See ya.